The message reached Earth at 3 in the morning, and within 30 seconds, every deep space monitor on the planet began screaming. It was not a greeting. It was not a diplomatic signal. It was raw fear, compressed into light and sound, bleeding desperation across the stars. The aliens were begging. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, in a reinforced command vault carved into black stone, Admiral Mara Kincaid stared at the projection in stunned silence. The signal spiraled in broken pulses, carrying fragments of images, burning cities, collapsing orbital rings, and shadows that moved like living storms across entire continents. Someone whispered the unthinkable. They crossed the quarantine. For 300 years, humanity had been alone by design. The Galactic Union had found Earth, and immediately sealed it off. Humans were classified as Category Red Deathworlders, too violent, too unpredictable, too dangerous to be allowed among civilized species. So Earth watched the stars from behind warning beacons and locked jump points. Until tonight. Dr. Elias Moreno, chief xenolinguist, broke the silence. The translation is stabilizing. They're calling themselves the Valari Concord. Agricultural civilization. Low military capacity. He swallowed. They're being eaten. The images sharpened. Entire oceans boiled away. Massive biomechanical creatures rolled across land like tidal waves of flesh and steel. Cities vanished under moving shadows. Defense platforms fired once, then went dark forever. This enemy? Kincaid asked quietly. Elias hesitated. Unknown. Hive intelligence. No communication attempts detected. They don't conquer. They consume. A young officer turned pale. Like the old legends. No one laughed. Because every species in the galaxy had legends about extinction swarms. And none had survived them. The alien transmission shifted. A single figure appeared, tall, crystalline, its limbs shaking as if struggling to stand. If anyone hears this, the alien voice cracked, translated imperfectly, we were wrong about you. We thought you were monsters. Please, prove us right. The signal ended. Silence crushed the room. For a long moment, no one spoke. Humanity had dreamed of this moment. First contact, acceptance, joining the stars. But not like this. They left us in a cage, said General Thomas Reed, his voice cold. Now they want us to bleed for them. Admiral Kincaid didn't answer immediately. She was watching the last frozen frame of the alien, eyes filled with terror, pride already dead. They didn't ask for mercy, she finally said. They asked for monsters. Earth's leaders convened within the hour. Military commanders, scientists, engineers, men and women shaped by a planet that never forgave weakness. The vote was fast. Unanimous. Earth would respond. But not with diplomacy. At the edge of the solar system, where warning beacons screamed "Do not enter," ancient engines awakened. Human ships, black-hulled, angular, scarred by decades of self-built warfare, slid out of dock for the first time in centuries. These were not exploration vessels. They were problem solvers. Captain Jonah Hale stood on the bridge of the HFS Relentless, watching stars bend into impossible lines as the prototype jump drive powered up. Around him, the crew moved with calm precision. No speeches. No prayers. This was what they were made for. Target. Hale asked. Valari Home System, replied Navigation Officer Chen. Enemy presence estimated at total planetary saturation. Hale nodded once. Rules of engagement. Weapons Officer Vasquez smiled grimly. Survive. Adapt. End the threat. The ship vanished into folded space. Across the galaxy, the extinction swarm noticed something new. Something angry. The first human fleet arrived without fanfare. No warnings. No demands. Just silence, followed by violence so sudden and precise that the swarm hesitated for the first time in its ancient existence. Human drones didn't charge blindly. They studied. They died. They learned. Swarm vessels dissolved under focused kinetic storms that shredded armor molecule by molecule. Viral code infiltrated hive nodes, forcing the enemy to experience confusion, a concept it had never evolved to handle. The Valari watched from underground shelters as the sky itself seemed to fight back. "They're not defending us," whispered one survivor. "They are hunting." On Earth, analysts stared at the data in disbelief. "They're rewriting tactics in real time," Elias murmured. "No central command. Every unit adapts independently." Kincaid folded her arms. "That's not a flaw. That's humanity." The swarm tried to adapt. Humans adapted faster. Then the swarm made a mistake. It tried to understand humans. It captured a boarding party. What it found inside their minds shattered centuries of evolutionary certainty, rage tempered by restraint, creativity born from suffering, and a willingness to burn everything, including themselves, just to win. The swarm released a signal. Not a threat. A warning. But by then, it was too late. Because the galaxy was about to learn why Earth had been quarantined. And why calling for human help was the most terrifying decision ever made. The swarm had never known hesitation. Across 1,000,000 conquered systems, it had advanced with perfect certainty. Every encounter followed the same pattern: resistance, collapse, consumption. Civilizations screamed. Worlds fell silent. The swarm fed and moved on. Until the humans arrived. At first, the swarm treated them like every other prey species. It rushed forward in overwhelming numbers, flooding space with living ships and weapon organisms grown for one purpose only: to kill and consume. And at first, humans died. Entire squadrons vanished in seconds. Human hulls were pierced. Crews were lost to vacuum and fire. For a brief moment, ancient swarm logic predicted victory. Then the pattern broke. Human ships did not retreat in panic. They fell back deliberately, leaving behind wreckage, debris fields, and drifting corpses. The swarm surged forward, feeding on the remains. That was when the traps activated. The debris detonated into controlled nuclear storms. Gravity mines collapsed space into violent knots. Swarm vessels were crushed, shredded, or thrown into each other with enough force to tear even their adaptive hulls apart. For the first time, the swarm experienced something unfamiliar. Loss without gain. On the bridge of the HFS Relentless, Captain Jonah Hale watched the tactical display with narrowed eyes. Enemy formations twisted, reformed, then hesitated. "They're slowing," Chen said. "That shouldn't be happening." Hale nodded. "They're thinking." Weapons Officer Vasquez leaned forward. "Sir, permission to push Phase 2. "Granted." Human strategy had never relied on brute strength alone. Earth had survived by learning enemies, environments, even itself. Every battle fed data into adaptive systems that rewrote tactics on the fly. Human ships began fighting differently. One group charged head-on, drawing enemy fire. Another vanished into stealth, striking from impossible angles. A third deliberately allowed itself to be boarded. Inside the captured human ship, the swarm poured in. And found nothing waiting. The corridors sealed. Atmosphere vented. Heat spiked to lethal levels. Then the ship detonated, not randomly, but surgically, sending fragments embedded with viral nanotech directly into the swarm vessels surrounding it. Within seconds, the hive screamed. Not in sound, but in corrupted thought. On Valari Prime, deep underground, the survivors felt it. The endless roar in their minds, the psychic pressure of the swarm, flickered. Hope was a fragile thing. Dangerous. But it was there. "They're not gods," whispered a Valari child. "They can bleed." Above the planet, humanity escalated. Admiral Kincaid stood before Earth's War Council, eyes fixed on the live feed. Casualty reports scrolled silently beside her. "We're hurting them," General Reed said. "But we're not winning yet." "They're adapting," Elias added. "They always adapt. That's how they survived so long." Kincaid nodded slowly. "Then we changed the battlefield." Humanity didn't just fight wars. It redefined them. A single encrypted command spread across the fleet. Operation Mirror Fire. Human engineers unleashed weapons that were never meant to exist. Not planet killers. Worse. They targeted the swarm's greatest strength, the hive mind. Human AI systems didn't try to dominate it. They reflected it. Millions of simulated human minds, chaotic, emotional, contradictory, were projected directly into the swarm's psychic network. Not as commands. As noise. Rage. Fear. Love. Regret. Creativity. Madness. The swarm recoiled. Its perfect unity fractured under the weight of human unpredictability. Nodes began disagreeing. Sub-hives hesitated. Attack patterns desynchronized. For the first time in its existence, the swarm experienced internal conflict. Captain Hale felt it through the ship's sensors. Enemy movements became sloppy. Delayed. Wrong. They're arguing, Chen whispered. Hale allowed himself a grim smile. Welcome to being human. The swarm retaliated. A massive bioconstruct emerged from hyperspace, larger than anything recorded. It moved with terrifying intent, absorbing weapons fire, regenerating faster than it could be damaged. Valari Prime trembled as its shadow fell across the planet. Target locked, Vasquez said. Weapons ineffective. On Earth, silence fell. That thing reaches the surface, Elias said quietly, and the planet is lost. Hale exhaled slowly. All ships, fall back. The fleet withdrew, drawing the construct closer to the planet. The Valari watched in horror. They're leaving us, someone sobbed. But Hale wasn't retreating. He was positioning. As the construct descended into low orbit, human ships activated devices never shared beyond Earth. Reality-bending engines that twisted gravity into weapons. Space itself collapsed around the construct. It fought. It adapted. Then the humans did something the swarm had never encountered. They sacrificed. 3 human ships rammed the construct at relativistic speed, detonating their cores inside its body. The explosion tore the entity apart from within, scattering its remains into harmless vapor. The shockwave rippled across the system. On Valari Prime, the sky cleared for the first time in weeks. The swarm fell silent. Then it sent a signal. Not to the Valari. To humanity. A direct psychic pulse, raw, confused, furious. Why do you fight like this? Admiral Kincaid watched the translation appear on screen. She didn't hesitate. Because we always have. The swarm withdrew, for now. Humanity had not destroyed it. But they had wounded something ancient. And ancient things remembered pain. As the human fleet regrouped, Captain Hale stared at the stars ahead. This isn't over, he said softly. No one disagreed. Because the swarm was learning. And when it returned, it wouldn't just be hungry. It would be afraid. The swarm did not retreat because it was defeated. It retreated because it was afraid. Fear was not something it understood well. Across its long existence, fear had belonged to prey, short-lived, disorganized beings that screamed before they vanished. The swarm had always been the inevitable end, not the one that questioned survival. Humans changed that. As the human fleet held position above Valari Prime, sensors detected the impossible. The swarm was reorganizing, not chaotically, but deliberately. Sub-hives were breaking away, isolating themselves, experimenting, learning. Captain Jonah Hale watched the data scroll across the bridge of the HFS Relentless. His expression was grim. It's copying us. Dr. Amina Solis, a civilian strategist pulled from Earth's darkest research programs, nodded slowly. Not copying tactics. Copying intent. It's trying to understand why unpredictability works. That's bad, Chen muttered. Yes, Amina replied. Because once it understands why, it will try to remove it. On Earth, Admiral Mara Kincaid stood before the War Council once more. The mood had shifted. This was no longer a rescue operation. It was a war for the future of the galaxy. The swarm is adapting to our weapons, General Reed said. Hull penetration rates down 12%. Psychic interference less effective. But morale impact remains high, Elias added. Other civilizations are watching. They see us holding the line. Kincaid's eyes narrowed. Then we give them something they can't adapt to. She turned to Amina. How do we break something that thinks in absolutes? Amina didn't answer immediately. Her gaze drifted to an old phrase etched into the wall of the command chamber, one that came from humanity's blood-soaked past. There is no such thing as a fair fight. We don't beat it by being stronger, Amina said quietly. We beat it by making it doubt its own purpose. The swarm returned 3 days later. Not with overwhelming force, but with precision. Dozens of human outposts across neutral space vanished simultaneously. Civilian habitats were struck. Supply routes were severed. The swarm wasn't trying to destroy humanity's fleet. It was trying to exhaust it. They're hunting our weak points, Hale said as reports flooded in. Just like we did to them. Valari Prime watched helplessly as the war expanded outward, pulling the galaxy into its gravity. Species that had once feared humans now prayed for them. But the swarm had one more lesson to teach. It attacked Earth. Not directly. The warning beacons at the edge of the Sol system flared as something touched them, studied them, and withdrew. Then came the message. Not words. Memories. Every human on Earth felt it. Nightmares flooded sleeping minds. Images of extinction. Of Earth burning. Of humanity erased from history like so many before it. Panic rippled through the population. The swarm had discovered psychological warfare. On the bridge of the Relentless, Hale felt his hands shake for the first time. Not from fear, but from rage. They're inside our heads now. Amina's voice was steady. Then we let them see what's already there. Humanity did not shield itself. It opened the door. Earth's oldest weapon was not nuclear fire or kinetic impact. It was experience. Pain. Loss. Survival. Human neural archives, recordings of war, disaster, sacrifice, endurance, were unleashed into the swarm's psychic channels. Not filtered. Not softened. The swarm felt humanity's entire history in seconds. It felt hunger that lasted generations. It felt fear that became courage. It felt civilizations burn and rise again from ash. It felt humans fighting not because they were strong, but because they refused to stop. The psychic backlash was catastrophic. Entire hive clusters collapsed into silence. Others went mad, attacking each other, unable to process contradiction. The swarm screamed. Across the galaxy, sensitive species collapsed as the echo passed through subspace. On Valari Prime, survivors wept, not from fear, but awe. They showed them everything, whispered a Valari elder. Captain Hale stared at the tactical display as enemy formations scattered. They wanted to scare us. Chen exhaled slowly. They scared themselves instead. But fear made the swarm dangerous. One final formation emerged, a core intelligence node, shielded by layers of living armor, retreating toward dark space. If it escaped, it would return stronger. Smarter. Amina's jaw tightened. That's the mind. The thing that remembers. Kincaid's voice cut across the fleet channels. All units. This ends now. The plan was brutal. Human ships formed a narrowing corridor, driving the core node toward a region of space humans had mapped centuries ago. A dead zone. A place where physics broke down. The swarm hesitated at the threshold. For the first time, it recognized a trap. Hale smiled darkly. Good. Let it understand. Human ships pushed forward, forcing the core node into the anomaly. Space twisted. Time stretched. The swarm fought, but adaptation meant nothing where reality itself refused to behave. The core node collapsed inward, screaming across every frequency. Then silence. The war did not end that day. But it changed forever. Across the galaxy, species gathered in stunned disbelief. The quarantined monsters had stood against extinction, and won something no one else ever had. Time. Admiral Kincaid addressed the Galactic Union with a message broadcast on every channel. We were locked away because you feared what we might become, she said. You were right to fear us. She paused. But you should fear what hunts you even more. Human fleets did not return home. They advanced. Because humanity did not fight to survive. Humanity fought to make sure no one else had to face the dark alone. The galaxy had always believed it understood power. Power was fleets. Power was numbers. Power was ancient technology passed down from forgotten ages. The Galactic Union had built its entire civilization on balancing those forces: careful treaties, controlled expansion, quiet fear of anything that disrupted stability. Humanity shattered that illusion. When news spread that the extinction swarm had been wounded, not defeated, but driven back, shock rippled through every known system. Species that had hidden behind neutrality suddenly realized something terrifying. The monsters in the dark were no longer the worst thing out there. The humans were moving. Human fleets pushed outward from Valari space, not in conquest, but in pursuit. Wherever the swarm left devastation, human ships followed. They didn't rebuild immediately. They didn't promise miracles. They secured space. They hunted remnants. They learned. Captain Jonah Hale stood on the observation deck of the HFS Relentless, watching a fractured moon slowly stabilize under human gravity anchors. Below, Valari engineers worked alongside human specialists, tentative at first, then with growing trust. They look at us like we're myths, Chen said quietly. Hale nodded. So did the galaxy. Dr. Amina Solis joined them, her eyes fixed on a data stream hovering in the air. The Union is panicking. Emergency session. All member species. Let me guess, Hale replied. They want us to stop. They want control, Amina said. They always do. On Earth, Admiral Mara Kincaid entered the Galactic Union chamber for the first time. She did not arrive in peace robes or ceremonial colors. She arrived in a military uniform. The chamber buzzed with fear. Species that once voted to quarantine humanity now avoided her gaze. Others stared openly, curiosity warring with terror. The High Arbiter spoke, voice trembling despite centuries of authority. Human representative, you were not invited to this council. Kincaid's expression was calm. Dangerous. You called an emergency session about a war you cannot win, she said. That makes it my business. Murmurs erupted. The swarm is wounded, not destroyed, the Arbiter said. Your actions risk provoking its return in greater force. Kincaid leaned forward. It's returning no matter what you do. The only question is whether you plan to die separately, or survive together. Silence fell like a blade. A crystalline delegate rose slowly. You are quarantined because you are violent. Unstable. You escalate conflict. Yes, Kincaid agreed without hesitation. And that's why we're still here. She gestured, and the chamber filled with data, battle recordings, psychic scans, swarm behavior models. Proof. Cold and undeniable. You have spent 10,000 cycles avoiding extinction by staying polite, she continued. It hasn't worked. The swarm doesn't care about your ethics. It doesn't fear your laws. Her eyes hardened. But it fears us. Fear rippled through the chamber. Then came the offer. Humanity would lead a coalition. Not an empire. Not a union. A defense compact. Human fleets would stand at the front. Human tactics would guide strategy. Human technology, previously locked behind quarantine, would be shared. In exchange, the galaxy would stop pretending humanity was a mistake. You don't have to like us, Kincaid said. You just have to decide if you want to exist. The vote was not unanimous. But it didn't need to be. Enough worlds said yes. Across the stars, something unprecedented happened. Human engineers walked openly on alien soil. Alien scientists studied human war doctrine. Joint fleets formed, awkward, fearful, but real. The galaxy learned quickly. Humans didn't dominate through cruelty. They dominated through preparation. Meanwhile, in the dark between systems, the swarm watched. It had lost territory. Lost nodes. Lost certainty. But it had gained something dangerous. Understanding. It now recognized humans not as prey, but as rivals. And rivals had to be erased completely. The swarm changed its strategy. No more scattered attacks. No more testing. It gathered everything. On the bridge of the Relentless, alarms screamed as long-range sensors lit up. Massive energy spike, Chen said, voice tight. Multiple convergence points. Amina's face went pale. It's calling every remaining hive. Hale swallowed. How long? Days, Chen replied. Maybe less. The swarm was coming in force unseen since the fall of the first galactic empires. On Valari Prime, evacuation began again, but this time, humans stayed. They didn't promise victory. They promised resistance. Human shipyards worked without pause. Old vessels were dragged from mothballs. Experimental weapons were pushed into service. Civilian industries converted overnight. On Earth, children watched skies filled with launch trails and understood something instinctively. This was a fight for everyone. Kincaid stood alone in the command chamber as the final projections assembled. Enemy numbers were staggering. Loss estimates unacceptable. Amina joined her. Even with everything we have, this will cost us. Kincaid didn't look away. It always does. Why keep pushing? Amina asked softly. Why not fall colorlessly, like the others? Kincaid turned then, eyes fierce. Because someone has to stand where the dark expects no resistance. The human fleets moved to intercept. Not to defend a single world. But to draw the swarm away from all of them. Captain Hale addressed his crew one final time before the jump. We are not heroes, he said. We are not saviors. He paused, meeting every gaze. We are the reason the galaxy gets another day. Stars bent. The largest battle in recorded history began, and the swarm would finally learn the cost of challenging a species that had made survival its greatest art. The battle began without sound. Space twisted as millions of swarm vessels tore through reality, emerging like a living storm. They filled the void, organic hulls layered over ancient intelligence, weapons grown instead of built, hunger echoing across every frequency. Opposite them waited humanity and its allies. Not enough ships. Never enough. Captain Jonah Hale stood on the bridge of the HFS Relentless, hands steady despite the impossible sight ahead. The tactical display struggled to keep up, symbols stacking on top of symbols until the screen looked like chaos itself. They brought everything, Chen whispered. Yes, Hale replied. So did we. Human fleets formed the spearpoint. Allied ships held the flanks, brave, determined, terrified. Behind them, evacuation corridors glowed faintly, carrying billions to safety. This battle was never about winning. It was about buying time. The swarm struck first. Biological beams carved through space, disintegrating ships in flashes of light. Entire squadrons vanished. Alien vessels fell back, formations shattering under pressure they had never faced before. Human ships surged forward. They did not fight clean. They flooded the battlefield with false signals, decoys, unpredictable vectors. Ships burned hard, pulling impossible maneuvers that crushed crews under acceleration, but they stayed conscious. Stayed fighting. Humanity had always paid for survival with pain. On Earth, Admiral Mara Kincaid watched the battle unfold in silence. Every red marker was a loss. Every green was a stand still holding. Amina Solis stood beside her, voice barely steady. If they break through. They won't, Kincaid said. Not today. At the center of the swarm, the core intelligence advanced, larger than before, reinforced, armored with everything it had learned. It pushed through the carnage, focused on one thing. The human command nexus. The swarm had finally understood strategy. Core node moving toward us, Vasquez said. Weapons barely slowing it. Hale's jaw tightened. All ships, initiate final measure. Across the human fleet, acknowledgement lights blinked on. Allies stared in confusion. What are they doing? A Valari commander asked. The answer came moments later. Human ships began overloading their drives. One by one, vessels broke formation and charged the swarm core at impossible speeds. They didn't fire. They didn't evade. They collided. Each impact tore massive chunks from the core, detonating with the force of collapsing stars. The swarm screamed across every dimension, but still it advanced. Hale watched the names of fallen ships scroll past. People he knew. People he respected. "Sir," Chen said quietly, "we can't stop it." Hale closed his eyes for a heartbeat. "Yes," he said. "We can." He opened a fleet-wide channel. "This is Captain Jonah Hale," he said, voice calm. "All remaining ships, hold the line." Then he turned to his crew. "You know the drill." No one argued. The Relentless surged forward, engines screaming as the ship pushed beyond safety limits. Hull plates glowed white-hot. Warning alarms filled the bridge. On Earth, Kincaid straightened. "What is he doing?" Amina asked, already knowing the answer. "His being human," Kincaid said. The swarm core fired everything it had. The Relentless took hit after hit, shields collapsing, systems failing. Fires erupted. Crew members were thrown from their stations, injured, bleeding, but still working. Hale gripped the railing as gravity failed. "Navigation," he said. "Lock us inside its central mass." Chen's hand shook, but she nodded. "Locked." The Relentless rammed the core. Not at speed. At precision. The ship embedded itself deep inside the swarm intelligence, tearing through layers of living structure until it reached the center. Hale activated the final device. A weapon humanity had sworn never to use again. A localized reality collapse. Space folded inward. Time fractured. The swarm core screamed, not in pain, but in understanding. It finally knew what humans were willing to do. The implosion erased the core from existence. The shockwave rippled outward, tearing through swarm formations. Without coordination, without purpose, the remaining vessels faltered. Allied fleets rallied. Human ships, battered but unbroken, pressed the advantage. Within hours, the swarm was gone, scattered, shattered, fleeing into the dark. The battle was over. The cost was unimaginable. In the aftermath, silence stretched across the stars. Valari Prime survived. So did 1,000 other worlds. But the HFS Relentless did not return. On Earth, Admiral Kincaid stood before the Galactic Union one final time. The chamber was different now. No fear. Only respect. "Humanity saved us," the High Arbiter said softly. Kincaid shook her head. "No. Humanity paid for time. What you do with it is up to you." Across the galaxy, memorials were built, not to empires, but to a species that refused to let extinction be inevitable. Stories spread. Of Deathworlders who fought with creativity instead of mercy. Of monsters who chose sacrifice over safety. Of humans. And in the deep dark between galaxies, echoes of the swarm remembered a truth burned into its fractured mind. There exists a species that turns fear into a weapon. A species that survives not because it is strongest, but because it never stops standing back up. And the galaxy would never forget the day it begged for help. And the Deathworlders answered.